Morning, it's October 31st. Nothing scary about that. In fact, when I think about this date, I don't think so much about Halloween as I think about the Reformation starting a little more than 500 years ago now, when Martin Luther nailed his theses to the Wittenberg um, city church. And that began the Reformation, which was, I think, a very significant time in church history. Lots of good things came out of that. Of course, lots of difficult things came out of it as well, but very important. And so on a day like that, it is good to remember what is the point of salvation. And Hebrews 2 does a really good job of showing us that salvation, as God has instituted it, is not for angels, but for people. And this is good news for us because we are people. And so Jesus didn't come to earth as an angel. He came as a human being. And Hebrews makes that point over and over again. It's not that Jesus is anything less than an angel, but he is, for a little while, put under them in terms of station, and lives with us on earth so that he can redeem us. And I think I'll start with verse 14 of chapter 2. It says this: Since the children have flesh and blood, that is us, he too shared in the humanity, that he too is God in the flesh, that's Jesus for us, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by the fear of death. For surely it is not angels he helps, but Abraham's descendants. For this reason he had to be made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people, because he himself suffered when he was tempted, but he is able to help those who are being tempted. And so Jesus brings salvation to human beings. And this is really good news for us. Again, not for angels, although angels are amazed when they watch what God has done. And that's a big point of what's going on here. And so the author of the Hebrews is reassuring his audience that this salvation is an amazing thing, not for angels, but for human beings. And so we are amazed by that and immensely blessed because God has initiated salvation for us by becoming a man and dwelling with us. And that is the good news of the gospel. Good morning. It's September 20th today, and we're in Galatians chapter 5. And here, Paul begins by saying, You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. And so Paul is saying here that freedom is actually a stewardship. We might think of freedom as, okay, I can do whatever I want, but Paul says, on the contrary, freedom means that we have a choice to make in what we do in obedience. And so really freedom is to be used as a resource that we have, just like money or time or relationships, all of those things that God gives to us as resources. Freedom is one of those as well. And we can invest it wisely and steward it well by loving one another, love your neighbor as yourself. And he gives a number of spiritual gifts or spiritual fruit that is a part of that. In verse 22, he says, The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self control. That's one way to invest your freedom. Another would be those acts of the flesh, which actually are not freedom at all. They're actually slavery to that sin and death again, repeating those things that we were freed from. And those were the acts of the flesh are obvious. Verse 19, sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, and witchcraft, hatred, discourse, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. So a pretty ugly list there that are the fruits of the lack of the Spirit, or the fruits of the flesh, that are totally in opposition to the fruits of the Spirit. And so there's a choice to be made because we have freedom in Christ, whether we walk according to the Spirit or walk according to the flesh. And the flesh really is death. It is destined to die, and it actually has terrible consequences for ourselves and for other people in this life. And so the choice seems to be obvious. And this is brings my mind back to Deuteronomy chapter 30, where God says through Moses, Behold, I set before you today life and death, life and blessing, death and cursing. Now choose life. Seems like an obvious choice, right? Why would you choose cursing? Why would you choose these acts of the flesh if you had a choice to be made in it? So freedom gives you an opportunity and a responsibility towards stewardship. And I think that's a good way to look at it. We get to participate with God because of the freedom that he has given to us, and we have a choice in how we invest that freedom.